Right over to you.
Thank you, Tanner. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Today, it's all about secure email and stopping URL-based threats. Hopefully, you can see my screen already. I'll start by presenting myself. My name is Sergio Pinto. I'm a secure email technical marketing engineer, being in Cisco for close to 16 years on multiple roles, and I'm based out of Lisbon, Portugal. So today's agenda will include URL defense. We are going over some of the fundamental protections that the secure email solution provides. Then we will cover the feature URL rewrite and analysis. We will discuss some of the XDR integrations that we have between secure email and Cisco XDR, previously known as SecureX, and some email threat defense updates as well. So as I said in the beginning, today's session is all about understanding how malicious URLs can be detected and stopped in our secure email solutions. There are several ways our solution works in order to be able to block these malicious URLs. One of the best options, of course, is to drop the attack before the connection is even made or the malicious email gets delivered. So we leverage techniques based on reputation to be able to understand if the senders are legit or not. Then we apply filtering based on our own threat intelligence research team provided by Talos. Based on that, we understand if the category of the URL or if the reputation of the URL means that it might be suspicious or not. And according to that, we may decide to convict the URL, to defang, to send to a product. We'll cover all these options. Based on the analysis that we do in real time, we decide what action we want to apply to that URL. We can deliver, of course, we can quarantine, we can remove the URL, we can rewrite, we can basically manipulate the URL and the message itself according to whatever policy a customer decides to apply to. And of course, we can go further and provide all of this information to third-party applications, leveraging integrations that can be used by other applications for their data and for their actions. So plenty of things that we can do in order to make sure that we create a barrier to prevent malicious URLs to enter your organization. Now, if we cover the fundamentals that I mentioned, this should be a no-brainer for everyone. Within our secure email solution, we cover pretty much pretty much three protection phases. The connection phase, where we are still trying to assume if the sender is or not legit. Then the connected phase, where we already assumed or guaranteed that the sender is legit. And I mean the sender is the sender domain, the sender server, the sender IP is legit. And the third one is the post delivery. And that for the incoming mail flow. On the incoming mail flow, we look for reputation scores, either for the mail server IP address, for the domain. We look for SPF records, DKIM, DMARC, TLS compliance. We look for spam, antivirus, file reputation, sandboxing. If it's gray mail, we apply all the content filters and policies that we decide to. And we even provide AI and machine learning detection techniques with our Cisco Secure Email Threat Defense. Of course, we don't do URL analysis on all of these blocks. And again, today's session is all about malicious URL detection. There are a few of these blocks where we do URL detection. We do not only URL detection on the incoming mail flow, but also on the outgoing mail flow and on the post delivery. The post delivery means that if the email got delivered to a user, there are ways to understand if that URL became malicious or not, and that can be due to additional information and research that our teams have done on that URL. We can go back and retrospectively remediate that email if that's the case. We can deliver the URL in a way that it's non-clickable or that redirects the user to a different page that provides a preview of the final website. So plenty of options for us to choose. Now, within all these blocks for email defense, these are the ones where we look for malicious URLs. On the anti-spam, because many times anti-spam is related with malicious URLs, namely phishing, gray mail as well. We apply content filters to understand the URL reputation, the URL categories, if they are according to the customer policies or not, to block it, to quarantine it, to change it. The outbreak filters, where Cisco Talos research team provides the latest attacks and the latest information for these outbreaks that we see in the world, and many of them have URLs attached. So this information is provided almost in real time by Talos to the secure email solution, making sure those URLs get blocked. Of course, Cisco Secure Email Threat Defense to analyze any internal emails, not only incoming and outgoing, but also internal mail flow. On the outgoing, we look for the malicious URLs with the anti-spam engine. We look for gray mail, and we do rewrite, as I said, if the email gets delivered to the end user. So whenever we are talking about the fundamentals, and I said that we look for reputation, we also look to analyze if the customers are using SPF, DMARC, and DKIM. These by itself doesn't stop malicious attacks, but it's a really good way to understand if the sender is legit to send that email, if that email is legit or not. So someone is saying it cannot hear me, but Tanner, you can hear me, right?
Yep, I can hear you just fine.
So
Yep.
Something local.
Let me I'll share the audio stuff with Gustavo.
Thanks, Brian. I was saying that SPF is a good way for us to verify if the sender that is sending that email is entitled to do so, if the message comes signed with a DKIM signature, if it's legit or not, what's the DMARC policy for that domain. So checking all of these factors allow us to understand if the email is, if the sending server intentions are legit or not. For your information, with this verification of what we call the sender authentication trifecta, and by leveraging reputation services provided by Talos, namely IP and domain reputation, we are able to block a little bit over of 80%, 80% of the connection attempts into our secure email solution. So 80% of the connection attempts are somewhat not legit and are on average dropped by our secure email solution. Now, if we go for URL filtering, and this is the next step after we accept the connection, we want to make sure that we trap and we understand where these malicious URLs or potentially malicious URLs came from. And for that, there are many options. We use the spam detection, we use the URL reputation, the URL categorization. So the majority of our customers don't allow URLs that are categorized as adult or pornography or violence. So those may be removed. But of course, those are many times hand in hand with spam and with gray mail. So we use all these engines to understand if the emails contain anything that should be considered malicious or not. Talos provides the information and the reputation about those URLs, and based on that, by scanning everything inside the email, we can do a comprehensive detection of suspicious or malicious websites and domains sent within the messages. So one of the great advantages that we have is the ability to couple that intelligence with the policy conditions and actions on content filters to make sure we remove those sites from ever reaching the end user. I'm going to show you a small demo of our Cisco Secure Email interface for you to understand how can we configure easily these URL filterings, and I will commenting along. I'm sorry, I just noted that this got a little bit blurry, but hopefully is enough for you to understand. Of course, URL filtering should be enabled on the Cisco Secure Gateway, either on-prem or cloud-based. And after it becoming enabled, URL logging should be enabled as well. This will allow us to have more visibility about the URLs that are embedded on its message. Then we can have content filters. Content filters work mainly in two ways. They have a condition to be met and actions to be made. The condition can be the reputation of the URL, for example. There are some predefined URL reputation thresholds that you can use. You can, of course, bypass some of these by having an allow list. You also have categories. So Cisco maintains a database of URL categories that exists, and you may allow, not allow, quarantine any emails, any URLs on that category. Then, of course, for the actions, we can notify, drop, quarantine, remove the URL. Based on the reputation, we can decide, as you can see on the actions, we can decide either to defang the URL, which is make it unclickable. We can redirect it to the Cisco proxy, which will show a preview of that URL before the user enters it, or we can replace the URL with a different message. We can add entries to our log, we can add disclaimer, etc. This site, docs.ces.cisco.com, has detailed information about pretty much everything that I'm explaining on this demo. And we'll also be able to understand what are the end results. I'll show you some examples of what the end user will see in each one of the options. So this is the defang. As you can see, we can still see what's going on with the URL, but it becomes unclickable. If we send it to a Cisco proxy, the URL is replaced by, as you can see, secure-web.sco. It's a Cisco proxy. It's a free of charge service that customers can use. And we can replace the URL with a message saying, hey, this URL was removed because it was suspicious. We can send to a custom proxy or an internal proxy parsing a parameter with the original URL if this is what you as a customer decide to do. So plenty of flexible options that can be used on our Cisco Secure Email solution to make sure that whatever gets to the end user won't be harmful for them. I've mentioned URL rewrite and analysis. So we try to understand if the URL has a reputation or not by leveraging Talos information. Talos collects information from hundreds of thousands of organizations and equipment to build this reputation database. Of course, there are some human curation into this information to make sure that the information is as usable as possible. And we provide some of the information back to the email gateway to make sure it gets stopped. Now, moving a couple of slides. If the URL has no reputation or it's unknown to Cisco, we leverage something we call CUA, Cloud URL Analysis. And how do we trigger CUA? CUA gets triggered if there are no reputation or it's an unknown URL. CUA also gets triggered if this is an outbreak filter. So if Cisco, Talos, decides that this URL becomes malicious and it's part of a new outbreak, CUA gets engaged. Whenever the URL is received by CUA, CUA will run the URL, will try to understand what is the goal of that URL. So it's almost kind of a URL sandboxing, where we will run the URL. We will try to understand what is the URL trying to do. Is it trying to download a file, trying to get credentials, try to change anything on the registry? We will leverage machine learning, heuristics, and some other information that we have to understand if that URL behavior is somewhat malicious or not. Something that goes hand in hand with CUA is the retrospective service. As I told you, due to many factors, a URL might be delivered to the end user and at that moment might not be considered malicious. Cannot be considered malicious because there is not enough information about it, and up to 72 hours, if we get additional reports of that URL, if we conduct additional analysis, we may consider that URL malicious. And what we do, CUA will run this URL again and will notify the gateway retrospection service and will say, hey, this URL is now considered malicious. The gateway maintains information about all the messages that have passed through the gateway, which URLs were maintained on those messages, and to which users those messages got delivered. And based on that information, leveraging a feature called mailbox auto remediation, the gateway can connect to the mail server, either Exchange or Office 365, and say for the user Sergio, make sure you remove the message with the message ID 1234. And leveraging Microsoft APIs, that message gets removed from the end user's mailbox, preventing the user from interacting from it. Of course, on the security email solutions, we are always trying to leverage more information and achieve higher efficacy by leveraging integrations. And this is what we do with SecureX and XDR. So as you know, Cisco SecureX has a new product called, it's now called Cisco XDR. Apologies, I'll probably call it SecureX a few times. SecureX allows a security operator to understand a little bit, in a little bit better and in an easier way, security incidents. So SecureX collects information from different sources, including Cisco email, correlates this information, provides information to the security operator. The security operator can do manual or automated tasks. The first step is to collect data. So SecureX gets data and observables for many sources, including Cisco Secure Email. Information like of course, the message ID, the message subject, the senders, the recipients, the attachments, the URLs. So it becomes very easy for a security operator to understand who received those emails, what was inside of that email, if that email got forwarded to additional recipients, if they forward it again to someone else. So it's easy to follow through after this. Of course, we correlate this information with other applications. We correlate information not only with applications from Cisco, but also third-party applications if we want to. And of course, we also have orchestration. And orchestration allows some automation. We can develop workflows, Cisco SecureX or XDR orchestration. It's almost a low-code to no-code solution or environment where you can create workflows that will interact with Cisco security solutions and third-party solutions if needed to automate and become proactive in some situations. If I see this, do that, for example. And this will allow us to leverage some of the solutions that currently exist, like Cisco Secure Email Gateway, Cisco Secure Email Threat Defense, and leverage their APIs to achieve integrations with Exchange on-premises and Google Gmail if required. So the orchestration will allow a level of integration and automation that does not exist directly on each product, but by uniting and combining all of those capabilities and leveraging those APIs can result in a faster way to detect security incidents, but also to create more streamlined and efficient automation tasks. Moving forward to email threat defense. Email threat defense provides and complements the Cisco Secure Email Gateways by providing AI, machine learning, and natural language processing capabilities on top of the reputation services that I've explained you before. Typically, email threat defense goes along with Office 365 or with the gateway directly, and we'll analyze all of these emails to understand if some of them are malicious or not. Email threat defense allows you to use one of two message sources, either Office 365 or the email gateway. After the email is sent to email threat defense for analysis, we use APIs to connect directly to Office 365, and based on those, decides to remediate a message, moving it to quarantine, deleting it, moving to a junk folder, or whatever policy you as a customer decide to do. If we think of a threat, there are mainly three stages of a threat lifecycle. One of them are the known threats, the ones that have been around for long enough to be known by pretty much every single security vendor. It's the security, I will call it, that everyone has. Of course, Talos Intelligence maintains their own database, and this is where we get the reputation scores about URLs, about domains, about files. Then there are the emerging ones, the ones that we know about them. We already did some research about them, and we already config them. And those are the ones that we have discussed previously as the outbreaks. And for those, we leverage Talos detection and research team to make sure that all the latest known threats, our information is pushed back to the email gateways and stopped as early as possible. Then we have the unknown ones, or the ones that are targeted. The ones that sometimes don't have any malicious URL or don't have any malicious file, but are still scam and are still malicious. The typical email where someone gets a message saying, "Hey, I'm traveling. I'm starting to enter a plane. Can you please wire transfer me X amount of dollars to this account because I will need them whenever I reach the destination?" This is the typical email that there are no malicious files, there are no malicious links, but still the email is a scam. And for those, we need AI and machine learning and natural language processing to understand the entire message, not to look only for the headers where we can detect user impersonation, brand impersonation, not only about malicious files and malicious URLs, but to read the entire email, understand the entire email, making sure that nothing is left behind, and assess if the email is legit or not. There are plenty of ways to understand. And what our solution does is to create signals. We have more than 100 signals that we look for. And the signals can be, it's a fake domain, it can be a malicious link, it can be a rare sender communication where the sender and recipient don't often communicate to each other, or it's the first time that they are talking to each other. It can be the sense of urgency where the email says, "Click here until the end of the day or else." It can be a reference to cryptocurrency. So all of these create signals. It doesn't take just one signal to convict the email. And I just gave you an example. Rare sender communication, it's a suspicious signal, but by itself won't convict the message. I could be doing business to any one of you on the call today, and probably it would be the first time that I would send an email to you. But also, if I was an attacker, and this is common on email-based attacks, I did never communicate with you before. This would be the first time that I would be doing it. So it becomes a suspicious signal as well. There are plenty of signals. As I said, I'm going just to show a few, but there are more than 100 signals that we look for. In EasyMail, we can see a few. This is an unknown sender. There's a request for payment. The sender structure, it's not very common. There are references to Bitcoin wallets. There's a sense of urgency. Make sure you do this. So we decide to convict this email. One of the great informations that, one of the great features that email threat defense has is the ability to provide information back to the customers. With email threat defense, you have full visibility of what's going on, incoming, outgoing, internal. You can understand how your organization is being targeted. And I'm going to move to the next slide so that you can see a little bit more detail. You can see exactly how your organization is targeted. Is it more about business email compromise, more about scam, more about phishing, more about malicious files? What is the amount of spam and gray mail that your organization is receiving? Who is being targeted within your organization? And by the way, this screenshot is from a demo environment. So of course, there are some of these email addresses that are not from real users, but you can see who is being targeted the most in your organization. How? Is it more about, again, business email compromise, scam, phishing, or malicious attacks? You get a list of the potentially compromised accounts, and the potential compromised accounts will provide you information, and you can see here at the bottom, these are users that have been seen sending malicious message internally. Somehow, either their credentials or their devices got compromised and are now being used to spread malicious message inside of your organization. Of course, email threat defense blocked all these messages. So all these messages that you see here in blue got blocked as well. They went to quarantine or got deleted depending on your policy, but provides you information that you should run additional security analysis in these users to understand what's going on. Of course, by leveraging APIs, you can get this information and take additional actions like disable the user account. If a user is being seen sending malicious message internally, we can create an integration leveraging the email threat defense APIs to connect to, for example, Microsoft Azure ID or Microsoft Active Directory and disable the user immediately, send a message to his manager saying, user W. Lee just got disabled to do security concerns. Please reach out to the help desk to have more information or whatever policy you decide to do. Email threat defense is pretty straightforward. So let me play here. You can search for anything on the search bar. I'm going to search for Unix. This will give you plenty of emails. One of them is malicious, and you can understand if this email was sent to someone else or not. So if I go to conversation view, I can expand the mail flow that this message went through. And I can see exactly what were the steps or the users that got exactly this email. So it's pretty straightforward information to see on the email threat defense dashboard. Oh, sorry, got repeated. You may think, okay, email threat defense connects to Office 365, but how fast is it to detect and run these security analyses? Well, this is done within seconds. So within seconds of email threat defense, get this information from the source, either Office 365 or email threat defense, we can immediately understand if the message is malicious or not. We have our own engines that can immediately understand if the message is or is not malicious. So based on that, we can contain the message. The message won't be able to be spread because as soon as it gets in, it will be understood as malicious and won't be able to get forward to other users. It becomes much easier and much more streamlined to use these within Office 365. So I would call it email threat defense acts as a complement to what Microsoft 365 offers for email security. And mainly, we can reduce the message trace and the containment and the remediation or action that we can take into a message. In this slide, it's 5 minutes, but honestly, it's always, in my experience, just within a few seconds, we can remove the message out of the end user's mailbox if that's the policy. So search and remediation is pretty straightforward. Everything is done on a single environment. You don't have any PowerShell or message tracking or compliance search that you may find in other tools. And I'm going to show you. So this is a video of a demo environment. I can quickly choose a message, decide to change the verdict or not, and change the remediation of the message. In this case, I'm going to delete the message. And as you can see, after deleting it, you get information that the message was queued to be deleted. Now, one of the interesting things that you can see on email threat defense is the ability to check the timeline. And the timeline shows all the actions that were taken on the message. And as you can see here, the message was received on June 20, and I decided to remediate this message this morning while I was recording this video. This was a manual action, but if the action was automated, you would see this being done in just a few seconds. So very, very fast detection and remediation time into the message. There's an integration between email threat defense and SecureX or XDR. You just need to go to your administration page and make sure that the SecureX or Cisco XDR integration is done. You have a button there that says authorize SecureX integration. After that, you need to authenticate. And by doing that, there's information flowing between your email threat defense solution and Cisco SecureX or Cisco XDR. And that was it from me. Before we go and before handing over to Tanner, I want to make sure that I can recap what we have discussed today. There are several stages within Cisco Secure Email Solution where we can look for malicious URLs. One of them is to make sure that whoever is communicating with our organization is legit. And for those, we leverage reputation services, SPF, DMARC, DKIM, to make sure that whoever is communicating with us is legit. Then we leverage different engines, some of them based on Talos reputation scores, to understand if the email is a spam, if it's a gray mail, if the URL has a good reputation or not, if the category of the email is or not allowed according to our organization policies. And then we have the post-delivery where we leverage email threat defense, and it's AI, machine learning, and natural language processing engines to make sure we detect these day zero or targeted emails. We understand what they are, and we make sure that they don't reach out to the end user. So there are plenty of options to choose. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution for every customer because every customer is different. Every customer has different requirements. The most important is that the Cisco Secure Email solution is very flexible and it allows you to create a policy, let's say, or a configuration that meets your requirements, and in the end, make sure that your end users are safe and whatever URLs get delivered to them are as safe as possible. And that was it for me. Thank you so much for being with me for these 40 minutes. Tanner, back to you. I don't know if there are questions.
Sergio, thank you so much. Great presentation. Right now, we do not have any questions at the moment, but just a reminder to our attendees, if you do have a question for Sergio, use the Q&A panel to provide your question, and we can answer it here or give you a quick response. While we do give it a couple minutes, Sergio, is there something that you want to touch on before we wrap up or share any links with our chat?
So what I can share is for you to leverage the demo as much, to try our solution as much as possible. Email threat defense is a very straightforward solution to deploy. There are two ways to deploy email threat defense. One of them is in audit mode. It means that it will leverage all the analysis and detection engines that I just explained. It will provide you all the information that I've shown during this presentation, but it won't take any action on the email. If you, as a customer, if you are using Office 365, it's pretty straightforward. You just have to create a journal connector in your Office 365. It takes a couple of minutes on the Exchange Admin Center. No PowerShell commands. You just ingest messages into email threat defense, and you get 30 days of free analysis into your environment. Of course, the second model of deployment is the enforcement model. It's exactly the same as the first one, but you can take action upon the message. My advice is to start a pilot and email threat defense proof of concept or proofs of value in audit mode, run it for a couple of weeks, and then if you feel comfortable about the results that email threat defense is showing you, activate enforcement mode or remediation mode to make sure that your users get as protected as possible. So I'm going to share the link here on the chat. ETD trial, if I'm not mistaken, is the link that you can use to request an ETD trial.
Perfect. And we do have a question that just came through. If we want to answer it real quick. A question from Jonas. My question would be how to position it against Umbrella. There are similar tests that both tools leverage.
Thanks, Jonah. That's a great question. I usually say, and if any one of you already saw me presenting about secure email, I often say security is like an onion. It's made of layers to protect the core. Secure email, it's just one layer. Umbrella is another layer. So there are different purpose for each one of the solution. Secure email tries to detect URLs to make sure that those malicious or unwanted URLs, and make sure that we detect those and we prevent those from reaching the end user. Umbrella is slightly different. Umbrella is trying to protect the users if they click the malicious URL. Now, if the question is, should I have or deploy one or the other? No, you should have both, because if by some reason the secure email solution does not block a URL and the user still clicks on it, if the umbrella decides that URL is malicious, or if you have a specific policy to block that URL that you don't have on the email, it will still get blocked. So you should see these solutions as complements to each other. Yes, you have your core, which is your Outlook or your user. Then you have additional one layer, which is the Outlook prevention mechanisms. Then a second layer, which is your mail server security mechanisms. Then a third layer, which is the email gateway. Then a fourth layer that is probably your firewall. And then a fifth layer that is umbrella, and so on and so on. So there are many layers that we can build within a security solution to make sure that our users are as protected as possible.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. As Jonah said, very well explained. So thank you for that, Sergio. I believe that at the moment that has covered all our questions. I want to thank you, Sergio, and to the whole team for bringing your knowledge to the Cisco community today. If you do have a question for Sergio, we'll keep the Q&A window open for a couple more minutes. For even more tutorials, demonstrations, and future webinars, please visit the Cisco Learning Network. I'll place a link in the chat screen again momentarily. Usually takes about 5 business days for today's session to be uploaded to the Cisco Learning Network. You can find that also at the link posted in the chat screen. Your feedback is important, and at this time, you'll be directed to a post-webinar survey. Please take the time to participate in that. It helps us for future sessions. Once again, we thank everybody for joining us today, and we will see you next time on the Cisco Learning Network.
Thank you, everyone.
Hello, and thank you.